Hey everybody, this is Stu Smith with another to, through, and after series of the Tactical Fitness Report. And we have special guest, former Army Ranger officer, Captain Bubba Eisenhauer. Hey man, just want to thank you for your time today and sharing your story with us.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Well, let's get right into it and just say, the basic question of who was Bubba Eisenhower before you joined the military? Like, what
Great
was your
question.
journey into the military from childhood civilian life?
So growing up, I grew up in a pretty military heavy family. Uh, Again, both grandfathers, my father, handful of uncles, all spent time in, and so that was something growing up that I knew I wanted to do. I also grew up really wanting to play college football, so I pursued both those things. So getting out of high school, I went to a small school, then spent a couple of years in Korea, like doing church work over there,
Okay,
and
cool.
then came back and was going to walk onto a bigger school, and ended up getting in a pretty bad accident with a semi truck. So
Oof.
that ended a lot of the um, kind of Division 1 bigger school aspirations. So after a little bit of recovery there, I ended up playing college football at a D3 school in Virginia. Loved it. Had a great time. I got to play with my best friend growing up. We played Pop Warner High School and college football together.
Oh, that's
So
awesome.
absolutely a privilege to do that. And then needed to get a couple surgeries before I could join the military. So I went home and back to Arizona and became a high school teacher, athletic director for a couple of years. So enjoyed that way more than I thought I would, but always still planned to go in the military after that. And that's actually where I first contacted you. So I
Okay,
was
how many
teaching
years ago was this?
7 or 8 years ago.
Okay, all right.
So initially I was pursuing uh, getting a buzz contract. I wanted to enlist. I didn't want to go the officer route, and so I was looking to enlist in the Navy. And was swimming and doing pull-ups, and but also still working out. So I think at the time when I was teaching, I weighed about 230, 235. So I'm 6'5", so it's
Woo,
not quite as heavy, but I was bigger that way, and
big
I was still
fella.
doing the football kind of focus lifting, and I think
That's
the
a
first
hard break. That's a hard break for most of us.
it really was. I think so. I was benching probably 365, maybe a little bit more than that, and I was like, oh yeah, like I could do push-ups all day. No, I did like 25, and I was burnt, and I was like, okay, I got
You
to
got one
adjust.
good set in you. That's about it.
Yes. But so I started training. I needed to get um, an ankle surgery, some knee surgeries, and then a shoulder surgery all before I went in. So
Damn.
knocked all that out. And then because of those surgeries, it actually complicated the process. So I did pretty well. I think when I reached out to you, I had just put in because I wasn't getting any traction on the enlisted side because of the airborne part of it and my shoulder surgery somehow.
Huh.
So they said try to go through OCS. That was my first time looking at that. I applied to the Navy OCS for an NSW contract, and they're like, "Hey, great job. Um, you didn't get picked up because of like ROTC slots and OCS slots from last year, but in 18 months you'll have one." And I was like, "No way. Uh,
Wow.
I'm not waiting another 18 months. I'm already old." And I think I was like 25 or 26 at the time. So I was like, "Yeah, I gotta go." So then I started
Huh.
looking at the Army, and same process. Tried to enlist both for a Ranger contract and a Special Forces contract. The day I was supposed to ship out with the Special Forces contract, they came back and said my waiver was no longer valid and needed to redo that. Long story short, ended up contacting a couple congressmen and then went through Army OCS.
Oh,
So that
wow.
was what I actually finally shipped out with.
Okay. Wow. Good job.
So
That's not
that
the
was a very
easy
lengthy
path.
story, but
No, that's not the easy path. A lot of people will take no and they'll say for the rest of their lives, well, I tried, which they wouldn't let me in. But did you really try?
yeah.
Right? You weren't taking no for an answer.
No, again, I knew I wanted to serve. It was important to me, and I knew I wanted to go into special operations thing. I think there's obviously an appeal there that like you don't fully understand until you're actually doing those things. But I knew that's where I wanted to go, and I was willing to work for it. So it just took time.
Nice. And patient. Yeah, be patient with it. You know? Yeah, absolutely. So, man, that's awesome. So tell me about how the officer training in the Army works. Like once you finish the basic training for OCS or whatever they call it, what is that pipeline to get into, Ranger Battalion, like where you served?
So that, again, that's a lengthy process, but the Army is the only branch, I believe, that you actually have to go through basic training to go to officer candidate school. So went through regular basic training. So I was like 26 and had a lot of 18 and 19-year-old kids with me. And so that was an adventure on its own. But basic training was fine. Then you go to OCS, which is like 12 weeks. And then and that's very general. It's very much like basic training. You don't really learn a lot about honestly being an officer at that point.
Yeah.
You get like a class on like, hey, this is property, and you have no idea how much that's going to affect you later on. You have a class on like, hey, this is a squad lane for infantry tactics, and it's very, very brief and very small. But you do kind of at least in OCS, the kids who wanted to be infantry officers very much separated themselves.
Oh, okay.
They're very much like the motivated kids who are very focused on fitness and on learning everything. So they're kind of both. Whereas you get other people who want to go into some of the softer skills who are very focused on like, well, no, I need to learn about this. As long as I pass my PT test, I'll be fine. So that was a little bit different,
right?
To be with people who just kind of knew what
That's
they
how it
wanted
was
to
in the
do.
Navy too.
Is it? Yeah.
There's
I
definitely
imagine the
jobs
officer
in the
like
Navy that aren't physically demanding.
Which
But you need
sense.
all of them.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So like I get it. Like
all part of the team. Yes.
There is nothing wrong with any of that. At the time, I think I was bothered by it. I'm like, no, everyone should be like breaking themselves off at everything. And then now I'm like, kind of smart.
Yeah, exactly.
They can still walk. That's great. So after that, in OCS, the way it works is your class ranking allows you to branch based off the allocations for that class.
Right.
So again, the infantry kids are terrified that they're going to get anything but infantry. And so they work pretty hard to get good slots. There's some other MOSs, obviously, like MI is a big one. Military intelligence is one that's very competitive as well. And aviation can be dependent on how it works.
Sure.
Anyway, so after that, you branch. And then for me, I went from OCS to IBOLIC, so Infantry Basic Officer Leadership Course. That's about 6 months, and you spend probably half of that in the field.
Okay.
So it's very field heavy, very like tactics focused, and then at a very basic level that you don't understand, but like you're just learning the basics.
Yeah.
And so it is pretty great that way. From there, you go to, for most infantry officers, to go to Ranger School. They get their shot at Ranger School. So I did Ranger School, then Airborne, and then Striker Leader course.
Okay.
Striker's like a vehicle that we use. It's kind of like a tank on wheels, but a little bit softer.
Right.
And anyway, so went through all of those schools and then ended up going to Alaska. So for Ranger Battalion specifically on the officer side, you can't stay there. So you have to do whatever job you're going to fill at Ranger Regiment, you have to fill conventionally first. So for me, I went up to Alaska to be a PL, did that, and then was only there for a couple months, deployed for right about 12 months. And then during that process is when I applied to go to Ranger Regiment. So I got back, went to the selection process for Regiment, and then was able to go to Regiment.
Right. So differentiate for me the Ranger School where you got tabbed and this Ranger selection where you actually are going to a regiment.
So this is something that I've tried to explain many times, and it still confuses people. But
it's difficult. Yeah, I get it.
Yeah. So the tab is, so Ranger School is a school. This is a schoolhouse, and it's basically focused on patrolling. I think they call it a leadership course as well, and there's some things you can learn about yourself to be a better leader for sure. But it's a school. Ranger Regiment is a soft unit, and that's the difference. So there's the selection process to get into Ranger Regiment, and so that's oftentimes what can be confused with Ranger School. Ranger School, though, is 60 days if you go straight through, which is very rare. So you can get recycled out of, there's 3 phases, and everyone is pretty miserable. And then after graduating, that allows the officers to apply at least to go to Ranger Regiment.
Okay, gotcha. So you have to be tabbed as an officer to apply for the Ranger Regiment selection?
There's very, very few exceptions to that.
Okay.
And sometimes needed MOSs.
Oh, okay.
You can go through the selection process first, and then if you pass the selection, they'll send you to Ranger School. But before you can hold a position in Ranger Regiment, you do need to graduate from Ranger School.
Nice. Okay, gotcha. So as far as intensity is concerned, I guess the Ranger selection assessment and selection is a little shorter than Ranger School, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Yeah, and is the intensity brought up to a level that is comparable to Ranger School, or a little bit higher?
So for officers specifically and senior NCOs, so there's RAS, so Ranger Assessment and Selection. But then there's also RAS 2, and so that's for the officers and senior NCOs. It's about a month long, and so I would say it's very much, it's not a beat you down course. It's not a grind. I think at that point, after graduating from Ranger School, after filling previous positions, recommendations, people know that you can endure some suck. It's not about that anymore. It's, can you actually perform? And so I would say most of the people that go there are phenomenal athletes. That's something that people don't fully understand, and you can learn to be that level. There's a lot of kids who are 18 years old where maybe didn't even play a sport in high school, who go into some special operations unit and start learning things like diet and sleep and like taking care of themselves for the first time, and they have that ability. And there's other people who just don't and will grind it out.
Yeah.
There is that as well. But specifically for that RAS 2 course, the people that you're with are exceptional. So it's not even just exceeding the standard for most of those guys. They're freakishly good at being strong and fast, and then also being able to think.
You know, one thing I like about the Army and the Marine Corps, similarly, is that the jobs that they have prior to these selections are preparing them for the selection, in some way, like you've everything's a stair step towards that selection. Whereas in the Navy and the Air Force, the guys wanting to go spec ops in those worlds, I mean, there is nothing that stair steps you towards that selection. You know, I mean, you actually have a career path that can drive you towards, the Ranger battalions if you so choose that path.
Yeah, and this is one of the best things that I feel about Ranger Regiment that I didn't understand before, and probably want to understand at least unless I was actually there, was that constant selection process. So people don't understand too, at advance in Ranger Regiment, you have to constantly be proving yourself. So you go through, as an enlisted guy, you're going to go through RAS, which is absolutely a gut check, to say the least. Like those kids deserve to be in Ranger Regiment if they make it through that.
Yeah.
So then as a young enlisted dude, you made it through that, so then you get to stay and you get to learn. Before you can hold any leadership position, so E4 or E5, you have to graduate from Ranger School. So then you go back, you have to go to school. So you might have 2 or 3 deployments, and then you're still going back before you can hold any leadership position, going to Ranger School. After that, to take the next leadership position, well, that'll get you through E5 and E6, but then E7 or E8 in Regiment, you have to go to RAS 2. So
okay.
Then that also is, it's not just physical challenges and physical things you have to pass the board. So it's constantly selecting and constantly performing. And so that really, especially at that senior level, you don't get stagnant individuals. And I'm not sure if you saw this, and I don't, again, want to bash anybody else, but I've seen that in some of the other groups where you have a one-time pass and then you're in the, like, you're here forever.
Oh, sure.
Where you get some of those senior enlisted guys who are kind of checked out, and that trickles down. And so I think that Regiment does a great job with preventing that. Through that
it seems like you're constantly growing
Mhm.
whether you're growing as a leader or, the unique thing I like about, those training programs when the selections aren't just gut checks, like you're getting deselected because your ability to not learn um, the tactical processes is what's causing you to get deselected, or
Mhm.
maybe some leadership issue that you're having too. So, that can happen as well. But usually it's, you're not performing in a manner that is acceptable to that standard that they're setting.
It really, yeah, I think it allows them to enforce that standard to a pretty high degree.
Yeah.
So I think it allows it to be an honestly great place to grow up for those younger enlisted dudes, and then stay or pursue other things with the military.
Well, let's talk about your transition out of the military, and what point of your military life did you decide to make that transition out?
So I think it started actually about probably pretty close to right after I got to regiment. At least having the talks with, so my wife is in the National Guard, but she's a pilot, and so she was in flight school um, during the time that I was like overseas both times.
Oh wow,
so
yeah.
so that made it very hard. And then in a kind of unplanned way, she got pregnant. And so again, both of us in talking about being parents uh, wanted to, I don't know, be there. And I think time is one of the most important things you can give a family. And so that's a personal thing of mine. I
Yeah,
know
you know
people
what?
who
I happen to share that same sentiment. I mean, I did 8 years in the Navy, and married, started having kids at that point, and it was that. You're right. It is a big commitment. Is a big time commitment. My first year of marriage, I was gone 9 months. My year of engagement, I was gone 9 months. So I mean, I mean, there are commitments and sacrifices that people have to make in these jobs, and I was honored to be able to do it a few times, but I did not have that personal commitment to do it for 20 plus years. And thank God there are people who can do that, because
yeah,
I did not have it.
I had I had some very interesting exposures to that with um, both on the officer side and enlisted side by hearing people's examples of kind of being legacy individuals. But one officer, his father was a general officer, and followed very similar pipeline. And he goes, I was asking him about it because he was telling me about his kids and how he's missed all of the Christmases and birthdays. I mean, when I say all of them, like there's pretty much all of them, and kids are preteens and getting close to that. And I was like, well, what did you think of your father? And he said, I didn't. I didn't really care. He just wasn't home. So I didn't have that relationship with him. And he goes, now at this point in my life, I can understand. And I appreciate his dedication to his call. And I hope that my kids one day will be able to understand, but I don't expect them to now. And I was like,
Wow.
that's a very interesting way to look at it. And I think like I absolutely can see the value in that. And he was a phenomenal leader. So I want
Oh
to
yeah.
preface it with absolutely phenomenal leader.
Yeah.
But it takes something's gonna fall, or something's gonna have to take the focus. And so that was just for me personally. That started putting those thoughts in my head when I was like, who do I want to be? And so I think that started the process. And then I alluded to it a little bit earlier. I was going through some injuries, and they just kind of kept getting worse and worse. And then for me doing what I wanted to do, I wasn't able to. And I saw that in some ways the writing on the wall with the tempo's too high and your body's not going to be able to recover. So
when was this? Were you about 30 years old when this happened?
31, 32. Yeah.
I tell you what, I don't know what it is, but being a former athlete, high school athlete, played 3 sports, and then played a sport in college, and then went through the spec ops journey at 22, and then by 30, I mean, that was a big. I mean, not just the family commitment, but my personal ability to move without pain was another big decision part of part of that decision. Yeah, because I was broken at 30. I mean, I had to spend the next 10 years rebuilding myself to be able to, be in less pain. That took a whole different style of training.
It really, it's been very interesting to me to go through that process. Obviously, I'm in that now, and I probably looks like I have about 9 years left to start recovering. But having my son, who's now he'll be 1 in about 2 weeks. There's a lot of bending down and picking that kid up, and he's a off the charts fat kid. So he it takes a lot. But even simple things like that, where like getting up off the floor and stuff, where it just takes a toll, which sounds silly maybe to the people who are listening to this who don't understand, but it's a real thing. Like just getting up off the floor causes pain. Doesn't mean I can't do it. So rebuilding those things. And my wife also is currently she got her CPT recently, and she's studying training for a master's degree. And so she gives me a lot of good advice, honestly. And she's like, your core is weak. I'm like, well, I'm aware. Thank you. I need to start working on it. But it is kind of fun. And she is helping with that process, which is nice.
I would tell you one thing that changed everything was my addition of a mobility day into my training. Okay. So midweek, I go to the gym, I hop on a bicycle for 5 minutes, and I stretch for 5 minutes. And I do that cycle, 5 minutes on, 5 minutes off, for an hour. Basically, think of it kind of like a spin class has a baby with a yoga class. And it was life-changing.
Okay.
Absolutely life-changing. Then take some of your old pool skills that you learned, go tread, opens up the hips, and then do all the dynamic stretches that you can think of that you did before football games in chest deep water.
Okay.
Absolutely will change your life. In a month from now, you're going to call me up and say, I can't believe, I've been doing this once a week. That's all it took. Yeah. You will be amazed at what that does. I've been doing it since I was like 42, and I'm 53 now. And there was a time in my 40s where I thought I would never be running again because everything just hurt so bad. Even after kind of rebuilding and stuff like that, kind of hurt. And then, that was a big help for me. I'm still running, just ran, 6 miles this morning, easy day, So anyway, I don't mean to change the focus of this discussion, but, everybody, if you're listening to this, I mean, that little mobility day is life-changing. In fact, I wrote an article on it, Mobility Day, life-changing exercise. You can Google it. It's out there, free for everybody. I'm not even selling it, but I do put it in all my workouts now.
Okay, no, that's good to know. And I think for me, it is, my wife and I have been talking that, and I'll try to run, but it's just a grind. Like it takes a couple of days to recover from like just a jog, And so I think trying to get more into swimming again, doing some of those different events. But I like that, just treading water and stretching.
Oh man, yeah, you're a big guy too, man. Heavier guys hurt. I'm hanging at like 200, and that's hard for me. So
I realized very quickly that I couldn't maintain weight in the Army. So I will say that I went in about 230, 235, and then end of basic training I was at like 215. Ibolic I was like 205.
Wow.
And then Ranger School I got on, I was like 172. I think is what 171, 172.
170.
Oh, it was rough. And then put some weight back on, but then especially like in Ranger Regiment, it's a lot of running.
Yeah.
So it's just weight does not serve you. And so I learned that. But now at this time I'm kind of like, no, I can put a little bit more on. But yeah, I think about walking around weight right now, it's about 210.
Oh, that's perfect. Yeah. I mean, you'll be glad that you're not 230 because it makes a big difference.
When you put miles on it, it does.
Oh yeah, absolutely. All right. So now let's talk a little bit about what you are doing now. Right. You made the transition into the civilian world. What do you do now? And I see Axon Aid. What is that about?
So essentially, so Axon Aid is they say the philanthropic arm of Axon. So Axon used to be Taser. That's what most people know it as. So they invented like the Taser that all law enforcement has now. They do body cams though. They do a lot of software and other tech for that first responder realm. And so they rebranded to Axon a few years ago. But Axon Aid is essentially the charitable or the give back arm. So it does three things. And so this is like, for my job now, I manage these three things. So it does charity. So under that charity section, we have a fallen officer fund. So if you die while serving in line of duty. And then we also run a lot of like community service with like the Salvation Army. We do like Christmas Angels. We do, a couple of years ago in the height of COVID, we sent out like over 1 million masks and PPE stuff like hand sanitizer to law enforcement units around the country. So that's one. We do a wellness pillar, which has primarily been focused on mental health. So providing free mental health resources for that first responder community. There's like scenario trainings that are scenarios that go through and have a licensed therapist or clinician go through and break those down and say like, hey, this is normal behavior. Hey, this is maybe a little bit much. Maybe start looking at getting some help. So pretty useful that way. We have some documentary style videos where people just share their experiences. And then we also have segments that have been rolling out this year where like how to improve your peer support network or your wellness program at your agency. We have one coming out in a couple of weeks on the science of trauma. So again, just giving free resources to that community in that aspect. That's something though that with me stepping into this role, I'm looking to expand. And then the last thing that I do is we have an emergency response drone team. So what this is we take drones out and then we take all the software and tech that Axon has and help in natural disasters. We've done protests, we've done some damage assessments for different situations, search and rescues. So really it's just, again, all of these things that I get to manage are free. So it's just resources that are available to that first responder community or in case of a disaster, pretty much anybody. So it's been very rewarding. I kind of stumbled on the job, but I'm really glad that I did.
No, that's really cool. So how does, like, if somebody needs you, how do they get in touch with you best?
So the easiest way, honestly, if you go to our website, there's like a request aid button. If you click that email will go directly to me. I also, if I interact with somebody personally, anybody that I've interacted with at like city centers or emergency response teams or law enforcement, I just give my cell phone number and they just call me.
Okay.
So keep it simple that way.
Oh man, that's awesome. So what can you give any examples of like some of the things you've done recently that that have
specifically for the ER team?
Whatever, for just any I mean, you don't have to give names or anything or even locations, just like some of the things that you've done that that gives you like, I'm really proud of this situation here that we were able to help in. Like where's your why in there?
I think so. Initially, I'll tell you, my draw to this team was the drone team. I thought it was a great way to give back and to serve. I thought it was kind of operational, and I liked that aspect of it. I felt like that would ease my transition, and that team is phenomenal, and it is a lot of fun. But the wellness stuff specifically has very much piqued my interest. I had a little bit of exposure to essentially the mental health and wellness stuff in the military, and was kind of blown away by where it props itself and then where it actually was.
Oh, okay.
And I was very interested by that. And then so coming out and looking at a lot of my buddies who are in law enforcement or the people that I know who just have that constant stress level, whether people recognize it or not, there is a constant stress level in most public servant capacities. And so learning how to manage that so that it doesn't affect your family, so that it doesn't affect you, or even things like your cortisol levels being through the roof, which destroys everything else in your body and then impedes everything else. So finding ways to help people with that, I think, became much more intriguing and important to me. And so again, coming out with these segments where we're working with absolute professionals on, hey, like this is stuff that like can actually help you. And so giving some actionable advice or giving people tools that they maybe just haven't been exposed to yet. I think we're at a turning point in the mental health stuff where I think before it was like, hey, if you're suicidal, like you can go seek help and here's the number that you call. Or it was just very, I think
It was too limited.
it's very limited, and then it was
Yeah.
also stereotyped very hard.
Yes.
And I think, and you can understand this in the military capacity. Like, I don't want my leader calling a suicide hotline. I want to be focused on the mission. So I do understand that aspect of it.
Sure.
But I think there's a lot of benefits to prioritizing your mental health. So maybe even talking to a therapist regularly. And I'm not saying that's the right thing. I'm just saying, like, as an example. But I think that if you know that something increases performance, so if somebody is mentally healthier, if they develop healthy habits to make sure that they, control their breathing or can manage their stress, and they're going to perform better, I feel like that should be normalized just as much as exercising and diet are.
Oh,
So I think anyway,
absolutely.
those are things that like absolutely have piqued my interest, and I'm very invested in for that first responder community and providing valuable resources that way.
Nice. I love it. What is your personal favorite coping mechanism? Like whenever you're stressed out, you're busy day, stressed out, and it can be anything. And I tell people this all the time. It doesn't really matter what your stress is, right? It can be I can't pay this bill at the end of the month, or it
Mm-hmm.
can be, you got bullets flying over your head. Hormonally speaking, they're very similar.
Stress is stress.
Right, exactly. So what is one of your favorite coping mechanisms?
I I would say
I'll share you mine as well. So
I think historically it has been just absolutely going to the weight room, right? Like that is for me. I know that I will have a much more balanced day if I can work out. And specifically, like, people talk about runners highs and stuff. Like, I hate cardio, right? Like, I just like I have to go to a dark place to get that stuff done. So it doesn't necessarily have the same effect for me. But lifting weights does. I enjoy just going, and it doesn't even have to be super heavy. It's more just about just feeling good and just exercising muscles, and then that'll set a good tone for me. So if I feel myself being very stressed, taking a moment to do that, even if it's just like some calisthenic workout I can bang out in the garage real fast, that tends to help. And then lately, for me, like journaling.
oh,
So if I'm really upset about something, if something is bothering me, just taking time to write it out, that's been a very good practice for me.
that's a very powerful one because that kind of helps you categorize it better in your brain when you put it to pen
Yeah.
and paper.
You can see your own flaws in it, right? So
Yeah.
it helps calm you down, and
Yeah.
absolutely.
It's really good. So yeah, I would call working out kind of like the primary coping mechanism. Like that's just for equilibrium.
Yes.
Right.
It
However,
keeps you where you're supposed to be.
Yeah, that's kind of like the bare minimum, right? You got to do that, right? And then the other ones, when things spike in the middle of the day for whatever reason, could be a natural or man-made event that caused it, caused that extra stress. Mine is breathing. Right. I take that big deep breath. And it's so funny. My wife is so used to it now. She'll say, "What's wrong?" Like whenever she'll see me go, take that big deep breath, big inhale, big exhale. And I'm just like calming myself down. And she'll say, what's wrong? And I'll just say, give me a second. And it's minor stuff. It could be as minor as like somebody's annoying me across the restaurant. I just gotta like not let it get to me. Right.
Yeah.
Or, just whatever. But that is a coping mechanism that can just make your life so much better, and you just kind of, use your breathing and your, exercise. And if you think about what we're trying to do here, when we have stress, we have a natural fight or flight response that needs to be addressed.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And, physical activity is a way to address that. Right. But we also have this incredible mechanism to take that nervous system and just down regulate it and just take those big deep breaths and the cleansing breaths, whatever you want to call them, and drop that heart rate a little bit. Next thing you know, you're metabolizing some of that extra cortisol you got in there. So
no, one, personally, like in what we're pursuing right now, from a wellness perspective, we're looking at doing kind of like a meditation or breathing exercises really is what it comes down to. And I think that there's a lot of again, in that first responder military community, most people are like, I don't want to meditate, or I don't have time to meditate. But that's not necessarily true for what it is. And a lot of times it is breathing, right? So that's something I've just started looking into, and I've met with somebody who I think we're going to try to put out a segment on that, on how to apply that stuff and give different scenarios. Like, hey, you're in your car, you just had a very stressful situation happen, whether it was responding to a call, whether it was just getting cut off in traffic. Okay, breathe, right?
Yep.
Now,
That's
before you go in your house, breathe, after a long day, all of those things. So I love that you said that. And I think, one, that validates the track that we're going down. But
oh man, I love it. In fact, I mean, we breathe every moment of our life, right? Until we don't. And you better get good at it, right? And there's ways to breathe for every activity, right?
absolutely.
Nah, man, that's really cool. I'm glad you're doing that. I have found those coping mechanisms to be very useful, and I didn't even realize I was doing them. That's what was even better. So when I learned them, I'm like, oh, I'm already doing that. In fact, I was able to apply it even tactically, because what do you do right before you start shooting, right? Take that breath, take a relax, get that heart rate down a little bit. And so you can even apply it, tactically, in those type of situations, especially when you need to engage that thinking part of the brain again, because you've gone into reacting and you're just doing, right?
Oh yeah.
Take a couple of big deep breaths, you engage that thinking part of the brain again, and everything slows down. You're able to address the problem and get through it. So
no, absolutely. I think anybody who thinks they're a good shooter, go do a little stress shoot real fast if you haven't before, and that'll change your whole tone.
Yeah, absolutely. That will tell you just how important breathing is.
Absolutely.
That's awesome. So, Axon Aid, that really seems like a really diverse philanthropic arm of your company there.
It really is. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just saying, where do you think most of your attention is focused on? Right? Is it the mental health side? Is it like I said, you were saying the riots and disaster recovery type assessments you were doing? Is it kind of spread out amongst multiple teams, or how is that set up in your
so
in your
one
company?
of the cool things, so we are not a nonprofit.
Okay.
We are literally just directly funded by Axon. Initially, I was looking at taking us into a nonprofit realm, and I actually love now that we're not. I think it shows genuine give back by the company, and then I also think it allows us to not have to worry about fundraising or to build money. It just allows us to do our jobs, and so I love that. With that said, there's only, for AxonAid specifically, there's 2 full-time employees. I'm one of them, and then I have a partner who helps me manage everything. But for like our drone team, we have 30 pilots, so they're on call 24/7. So we have about 30. We have 4 people on call every week, and so they're all Axon employees. So they're all volunteers. They go through an application process, a little selection, and then we go through, make sure managers are approving everything in their schedules. But we can be anywhere in the continental U.S. Within 24 hours, which is pretty good, considering we have people all over the place and doing different things. So we can be on site pretty quickly, and they're just motivated individuals who want to help. So we do an annual training, and then we do some, which is 3 days, and then we do some Zoom trainings and some on-site trainings throughout the year to keep current. But that team takes a decent amount of managing to continue to train and track and network, but it is pretty fun. On the wellness side, we just partner with individuals. So again, nothing we do costs. All the resources that we provide, or anybody that we partner with, also has to be in the same boat. So we're not going to charge for resources or let people charge for ours.
Nice.
So that's something that I love. I think it keeps it pure. And I think that I want to work with people who are genuinely motivated to give back in that aspect. And I understand that like not everybody can. There's some absolutely phenomenal organizations and entities that do response teams that charge for them, or they do wellness material that's quality. Uh, so I don't want to take anything away from them. Just for us and our focus and our mission, that's what we choose to settle on.
You know, there's something to be said about that, because I have found that, you know, in my own business of working out and writing about it, you know, if I'm going to write about training, I need to be training people, right? And so
Yeah.
I train people for free who want to serve, right? And that gives me it gives me a great way to give back, but it
Mm-hmm.
also is a great source of information coming back. Like, you can see what your customers need,
Yeah.
right? And so I have found it to almost be, you know, even though it is a great program that is, you know, free of cost, um, it is a great way to get that information, and almost like a test and evaluation, research and development arm of the company as well.
Yeah.
You know, so
We,
it's kind of a win-win for everybody if you think
no,
about it.
absolutely. And that's what I think, like a lot of the people that we work with and we interact with maybe don't partner with to come out with material, but they'll provide valuable insights. Like one of my favorite things that we found out recently is I think it was like 70%, maybe just over 70% of individuals who um, are struggling with mental health and specifically law enforcement capacity directly related to leadership.
Wow.
Like, so that's, again, where we focus our time and attention and materials is needs to be focused on where it actually can make the most difference, right? So finding that stuff out, and then looking at that and being like, this is going to be a very complicated thing to get involved with, but how can we make a difference? And then starting to survey. And so we do have people who spend money or work through grants to do that research across the country, and then we were able to partner, at least um, share information that way, which has been very beneficial.
Well, that is really awesome. I appreciate what you are doing. So tell me this, Bubba, what's next?
I
What's
think
next for you? You know, in the next part of this journey, because we never stop. So
no, I think for right now, like growing where I'm at. I love working for a company that's focused on actually giving back and doing it in the ways that they do. So continuing to grow wellness resources, uh, taking everything we can overseas and do it international. Help first responders everywhere. So looking at doing that, and that's kind of my focus right now. And then also just being a cool dad. That
that is
honestly
important.
it's my favorite thing, to get kicked in the face in the middle of the night by a little kid and then him smile at you. So I am loving actually having time and being able to dedicate it to him.
Yeah, I don't regret. I don't regret it at all. You know, my choices that, you know, that I made. My kids are now uh, in their 20s, so
How's that
uh,
feel?
oh yeah, I feel old, but it's nice. It's fun. I was there, you know, as
Yeah,
the whole time, and it's been a good journey for all of us. We all grew, you know,
that's
out of that one decision, you know. So,
yeah,
but you know, on the flip side, you know, I have buddies like you who have still in. I have 30 plus years that are still in the military, and just their families are incredible. You
yeah,
know, absolutely incredible families. So you can make it work. You just need to really work hard to make it work, and your spouse has to be, you know, really cool as well.
absolutely. I saw a lot of very very high speed individuals start making that transition to be pilots. Go to so that was a pretty fun transition that I saw a lot towards the end. Uh,
Yeah.
Not just because of my wife, and like, but I got asked about it a lot. It was like, hey, since your wife's a pilot, can she help me out getting to flight school? And so that was actually pretty fun. But it was a great way for those guys to transition and be still in the military, but still serve. So
Yeah, absolutely. So, hey man, I thank you so much. So let's do this. Let's wrap this up, but tell everybody where they can find out more information about you and Axon Aid.
I think honestly the easiest way to do it is if you just Google Axon Aid. So it's AXON and then AID. If you Google Axon Aid, there'll be request resources, or there's also if you have questions, you can just fill out a form. All of those go directly to me. If you do have military questions, again, I reached out to you a while ago to ask for some help and guidance, and you took the time to give back, and I appreciate that. And I do I understand what it's like to be hungry to go in the military and to want to serve in that capacity, and how hard it can be sometimes to find information, even in the day and age of YouTube and
Sure.
social media. Sometimes people are very vague with their answers, or they try to keep things close to their chest. But if anybody has any questions that way, I'll make sure that my email gets in the description if that's cool.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I'll put all your contact information into the description of this video, and happily share it on my social media and things like that. So
yeah, I'm pretty responsive, so feel free to reach out at any time, and I'll get back to you. And then on the law enforcement side or the first responder side, if you have use for any of our resources, please reach out and I'll get back to you.
That's awesome, man. I really appreciate you. Well, first of all, you reaching out to me years ago, but also weeks ago as well, and closing this circle on your journey. I'm excited for you. Congrats, and I look forward to hearing more about how many people you're helping with what you're doing now.
I appreciate it. I'm going to start applying the spin yoga class idea and get back in the pool.
I'll send you the video. I'll put a link in the description as well for that, because I'm telling you, it's life changing.
Perfect.
All right. Hey, thank you very much, Bubba. I appreciate your time as always. And for everybody, this is a 2 through and after show series, part of the Tactical Fitness Report podcast. And you can find these on where you find your podcast, but as well as here on YouTube as well. So, all right, folks, I appreciate it. And until next time, we'll see you later.